Thank you, Bill. And before we jump into questions, I wanted to start here and just acknowledge it's been a long week. We did have a student athlete meeting yesterday, and really the messaging to our student athletes is what I really want Cougs all over the state, country, and world to really hear is Washington State's going to be okay. It's going to be different, but we're going to be okay. Specific to our student athletes, I reassured them their experience this year and 23-24 is going to be similar to the experiences they've had as student athletes here in the past. And our goal as President Schultz, myself, our board is to make sure that we put them in a position where their experience remains similar going forward. So this environment is uncertain. Don't have many answers right now where we sit on what this looks like after this year. But for all of us, we're going to control the controllables. We're going to keep moving forward as athletic department. And the reality is it is our belief the best days of Washington State are still directly in front of us. So I'll pause there, Bill. If you want to begin the Q&A, we can.
All right, we'll take questions from those online. If you do have a question, please raise your hand and we'll bring you in. We'll just go one question at a time per reporter. And we will start with Jamie Vinnick. Go ahead, Jamie.
Pat, just first off, thanks for taking time to do this.
Thank you.
I think one of the big pressing questions is, will you look to still play the Apple Cup beyond this season, or is that over?
I think it's a layered decision. One, the practicality of it is football scheduling is complicated, and beyond this year, that is a huge question mark for us. Two, the reality is this environment is very clear right now. There are the Apple Cup is a national game. It is a national rivalry. It's a valued game from a TV property standpoint. So wherever we end up, it's not going to be an emotionally based decision. It's going to be based on what's best for Washington State, what's best for our student athletes. So that is right now where that is in the decision tree is a little bit further down because we're more focused on securing the best future for Washington State, and we'll make those decisions in the appropriate time, but they will not be based on emotion.
Next question, Tim Booth of the AP. Go ahead, Tim. Go ahead, Tim.
Pat, you there?
Yes.
Sorry about that. As you're going through this process, what are your priorities as you're speaking with other schools, other conferences, and trying to find a home?
It's really, I mean, you look at where Washington State has been. Our TV ratings are, if you were to look at the three conferences between formerly the Pac-12 or what it was, the ACC and the Big 12, we'd be, depending on the metrics, the top third or top half of the TV ratings. Our football program has been to seven consecutive bowl games. Our women's basketball program just won the Pac-12 championship. Our men's basketball program just has gone to back-to-back postseason. So I recognize the caliber of student athlete that we've continued to attract to Washington State. It's indicative in how they perform academically, how they perform athletically, and the goals going forward is to ensure that we put them in positions to compete at the highest levels. Complicated based on decisions made by others, but we're going to continue to find the best home for our young people for them to be able to pursue their athletic goals.
Next question, Greg Woods of the Spokesman. Go ahead, Greg.
Hey, Pat, over the last year or two, did you guys at any point receive an invite to another Power 5 conference?
It's not that simple of a question. We've been committed members of the Pac-12 conference, for in whatever iteration it was for over the past century. So the world changed last Friday, and now we're trying to figure out what the best future for Washington State is.
Next question, Julian Minninson. Julian, go ahead.
Thanks for taking the time, Pat. What does the overall impact of all of this look like for the not just the athletic department when it comes to the other sports, but jobs and everything that kind of falls under there in the athletic department with all this movement going on here?
Well, it's some is a little bit to be determined. Like I said, we recognize we're going to be okay. It will be different just simply because sports on the West Coast changed, at least in the interim, because the one constant is change in college athletics, and the reality is realignment is not done. And so, as I think President Schultz has been very clear, we're committed. We are a Power Five school. Our performance indicates that we are a Power Five school. We're going to do our best to continue to compete at that level. And that's really our goals going forward. So, what are the long-term implications, short-term implications? I don't have that answers because we have to figure out what our home looks like beyond this year. But our goals have not changed at Washington State. Economics have never impacted our ability to perform at Washington State. I think one of our staff members very acutely pointed out to me that nothing has changed for Washington State. We continue to battle against schools that have higher resources than us. We continue to battle against what people determine we should be based on the size of the TV market. And that has not changed for Washington State, and we'll continue to battle forward and put Washington State in the best position possible.
Next question, Gianna Cephalou. Go ahead, Gianna.
Hi, Pat. So you talked about in the student opener student athlete messaging. What were their primary concerns? What were their reactions to all of this conference realignment going on?
Well, we'll have continuing conversations with them. I believe, the president has asked us to convene a student athlete group, which I believe they'll meet in short order, maybe even as early as tonight, to get feedback. The questions we took or feedback we took were more about, postseason travel. I think just, we made it clear there weren't a lot of answers today, but what we could answer, we'd be willing to speak about. But, there were the normal concerns of, 18 to 22-year-olds that are really trying to figure out what the world looks on beyond this year. And that really was kind of the theme is, hey, this thing is still the Pac-12 as we know it for 23, 24. If you look at the performance of our athletic department, last year, even the most recent years, the comprehensive excellence that's gone across the board will continue this year. And our teams are positioned in all sports to compete, for Pac-12 championships. So it's really just reminding everyone, let's focus on let's control the controllables, and let's continue to go down this path together.
Next question, Taryn Kowach. Taryn, go ahead.
Hi, Pat. Yeah, I was, the Pac-12 is known for its, academic standard, and the university, Washington State University is as well. So I'm wondering how the balance has been between, trying to keep that in mind while trying to find a suitable home for Washington State.
Well, I guess the Pac-12 you speak of is a older version of the Pac-12 that no longer existed. And we learned that in real time based on what happened last week. So, there's a bunch of, in 2023, there are different criteria in what a meaningful conference needs to look like for Washington State, what conferences as a whole look like. I've been very clear, we are being ripped apart in college football, specifically due to economic forces, due to market forces. And until there's better leadership as a whole, this is going to continue. What happened to the four schools that remain in the Pac-12 is going to be a theme that you see over the course of the next decade, unless we get better leadership in college football.
Okay, next question, Chris Daniels. Chris, go ahead.
Yeah, Pat, just following up on one of those previous questions, just to drill down a little bit more. That the president has spoken with ESPN in a story that was published today, talking about the loss in revenue potentially at 40% and mentioning the word layoffs. Is there anything, given what is known and what is unknown, that you do right away in terms of budgeting or scheduling, given that the next football season is a year away?
Yeah, I mean, the problem is those are the two priority issues, are trying to understand what a budget should and could look like, and then scheduling is probably the next piece after that. And that's why the first order of the business is really figuring out what a home for Washington State football looks like beyond this year. So everything else is a question mark until we get number one solidified. And that's what President Schultz and myself have been working on since, we understood, when you're going through the possibility of outcomes of where we're at as a Pac-12, this was always going to be a possibility. I think it's been very clear and been widely reported that on multiple occasions that there was belief that the nine existing schools or 9 remaining schools were going to agree upon media rights, and obviously it didn't happen. And we're going through we're going through an effort here to ensure that we end up in the best place possible for Washington State, and we'll make decisions based on where we end up.
Next question's coming from Travis Green. Travis, go ahead.
Hey, Pat. There's been a lot of backlash for these teams leaving these power conferences to another power conference and it being focused solely on football and not thinking about how it affects the other athletes, the student athletes in the other sports. I know you see WSU as a Power 5 conference school. How much will that factor into the decision that you guys make going forward, thinking about the other sports?
Well, we don't call them other sports at Washington State. I mean, all of our sports are equally important to us. We recognize, football does command the most eyeballs. That's why we're taking feedback from our student athletes. That's why we're convening them. Our faculty athletic rep, Nancy Swanner, is actually leading this exercise. There's some realities that'll come into play. We want to make sure whenever we get to a place of where we're at from a decision place, that we factor in our student athletes' perspectives as best as possible. The reasons and rationales on why other schools make those decisions, I'm not going to jump into, but we're going to do our due diligence to ensure that we end up in the best place. And the reality is, where we sit today is that is an unknown, but there is a place for Washington State, and we will get there.
Alex Crescente, go ahead.
Hey, Pat. I know you probably got a lot of lawyers looking through all of this, but is there anything in terms of antitrust that you could potentially be looking at when it comes to TV networks, potentially locking out Washington State and Oregon State from the big table there, and making sure that they don't have a seat? I know there's a lot of TV money that runs through that, but are you looking at anything in terms of antitrust?
I know the existing board of the Pac-12, which is the remaining 4 presidents, are having dialogue about what options are going forward. So where that is, that's a Kirk Schultz question, and he's the only one that can answer that.
As a reminder, if you have a question, please raise your hand. We'll call on you. Back to Jamie Vinnick. Go ahead, Jamie.
Pat, President Schultz in his ESPN.com interview today mentioned 3 contingencies: the Mountain West, reconstituted Pac-12, and the American Athletic Conference. Are there any other contingencies that you're working on?
Yeah, I think everything's a contingency is a reality, but we are, I think the term he used, or the term we're using, is we're trying to keep as many irons in the fire as possible. And, we're having dialogue with a lot of people in real time. And like I said, and there's still movement, and there's going to be movement. And, I remind everyone, the realignment is far from over. It may pause, maybe for a season, but as things settle, as new memberships have to adapt or not adapt to where they're at, as TV keeps driving, continues to be a driving force in decision making in these conferences, their realignment is going to continue to happen.
Greg Woods with the spokesman. Go ahead, Greg.
Hey, Pat, what's your understanding of how the distribution of Pac-12 funds with the remaining 4 schools will go, and what could WSU be in line for in terms of that?
Really no clarity on that at this moment. And like I said, that I know the Pac-12 board is, in the process of trying to map out whatever options are on the go forward, but I would have no clarity on that.
Julian Minenson. Go ahead, Julian.
Hey, Pat, just to follow up on one of the earlier questions about the Apple Cup, would you agree to the game if it wasn't to be played in Pullman regularly?
Like I said, we're not making any decisions about the Apple Cup. I'm not doing any hypothesis about what could be. Whenever that point comes into time, we'll make decisions based on what's best for Washington State, plain and simple. And I don't see not playing the Apple Cup in Pullman not being the best. I don't see how that it would ever be a good decision for Washington State.
Chris Daniels, go ahead.
Yeah, Pat, in the announcement that was made by the University of Washington over the weekend, the president and the athletic director both addressed the relationship with Washington State, and Jen Cohen in particular mentioned you and how good of a friend you have been over the years. Can you explain what the conversation was like when the University of Washington told you that they were making the decision that they made?
Brief.
Like your answer.
Yes, like my answer.
But anything you can say about the conversation that you had with Jen, because based on her answer to this whole decision, it sounded like there were a lot of mixed emotions there based on the relationship that she has with you.
Yeah, which is not unexpected, but I mean, it's we're at a decision made by a school that you've partnered with on many levels throughout the state. As we know, higher education is a priority, has been a priority for the state of Washington. The two universities, at least in my time here, have worked in tandem on so many things to improve the state of Washington. And the reality is the decision by one school within our state negatively impacts a school in the other part of the state. And that's just the reality of what happened last Friday. And my job isn't to sit here and dwell on, what just happened. My job is to ensure that we have the best path going forward. And now I'm going to continue to try to, do everything I can to get us there.
Kim Booth, go ahead.
Pat, as one of the 4 remaining members, you currently still are a auto bid conference to the college football playoff. As you're having these conversations with various other leagues and schools, how much is figuring out a way to retain that part of those discussions?
I think it's what we said earlier. We're just trying to keep all options on the table and viable, and we'll continue in whichever option generates the most momentum is we'll continue to push, but all options are on the table.
Karen Kowach, go ahead.
Hi, Pat. Over the past couple of weeks, there's been a lot of reports coming out over the series of events that led to everything happening. I just wanted to get your perspective of, what the conversations were like leading up to the decisions. And from your perspective, what do you think was, the main thing that led to everything happening over the past couple of weeks?
Well, I think it's been well documented that the last couple of weeks was a culmination of years of failed leadership, failed vision, failed implementation. It isn't one singular thing that led to the destruction of the Pac-12 as we know it. It was a bunch of decisions and failed strategies that put us in this place. And it's unfortunate because the ones who lose out on that are the student athletes on the go forward. That I could pull Jack Thompson in here, all from the days of Jack Thompson through Clay Thompson through Gardner Minshew and Morgan Weaver, and they're all going to talk about the experiences of playing in the Pac-12 and the opponents and the memories. And we're not the only school. There's a century of history that has gone by the wayside because this conference has mismanaged itself on a bunch of different levels. And when you have poor leadership, one of the outcomes is failure, and that's what has happened to the Pac-12.
All right, Jamie, go ahead.
Pat, just to kind of follow up on my previous question, President Schultz said the Mountain West might be the outcome, and whether it's that or something else, and with that, President Schultz mentioned a potentially large revenue hit. What's your concern level on one, the transfer portal, and 2, losing coaches?
I'm not going to speculate on where we end up. Like I said, all options are on the table right now. Whenever we get to that point, we'll get to that point. Whether we're in the Pac-12, Southeastern Conference, Big Ten, or you name the league, the transfer portal is a challenge. So that challenge has not gone away. for any school, and that has not changed at all for college athletics and college football specifically. So wherever where we end up, we'll start making decisions, and I'll have more concrete answers at that point. But everything is speculatory at this point, and there's no point in me living in the speculatory world.
All right, Kyle Bonagera, ESPN. Go ahead, Kyle.
Yeah, Pat, you mentioned just now the poor leadership in the conference. Was that understood throughout the conference that it was bad leadership as it was happening? Or did it take you guys some time to look back and realize how bad everything was? And if you did understand it at the time, like what forces allowed the leadership to stay in place for as long as it did?
Well, I think there's a great leadership book that's to be written someday when you look into what happened in the Pac-12, and I think it's been well documented with from the start of the Pac-12 network and how it was launched and decisions that it created on all campuses, including ours, and where that led to where we're at today. So, like I said, it's not when things like this happen, it rarely is it one singular thing that becomes a tipping point. It's a buildup that got to this place that. At the end of the day, there was always a belief that everybody also understood the responsibility that the membership had towards sports on the West Coast specifically, but market forces are pulling college athletics apart, and we're no different than what's going on around the rest of the country. So, obviously it's pretty clear the way, at least college athletics conferences are structured. Presidents hire the commissioner, presidents hold that commissioner accountable. And at the end of the day, we're at because of poor leadership, but that's a lot of people involved in that equation.
Okay, next question, Taryn Kowach. Go ahead, Taryn.
Yeah, Pat, you mentioned the ongoing communication between you and the remaining 3 schools in the Pac-12. Earlier this week, there were reports about ACC and then Stanford and Cal potentially being interested in joining. So I was wondering what those conversations are like. Are they, input between all the 4 schools on what the next decision might be for all 4 of you, or is it just does it lean more towards transparency of just explaining that this is what we're doing right now?
You have 4 colleagues that understand what the environment is currently at and are working to ensure that their institutions are positioned best in this environment.
I have time for just a few more. If you have a question, please raise your hand. Greg Woods, go ahead.
Hey, Pat, in President Schultz's interview with ESPN, he said that you guys are facing a budget crunch that would represent 40% of the school's athletic revenue disappearing. I'm wondering in what ways would that impact the school, and kind of practically what would that look like?
Well, I've not modeled. I mean, the reality is where we're at from a conference distribution standpoint will change, and we have not modeled those out only because the task at hand is to find a future home for us. But like I said, I'm not going to speculate, but it's going to have impact. I mean, you don't have to be a finance expert to know that. But we'll start modeling out what this needs to look like. But it's hard to do when we really don't understand, have full view of what our revenues could be or will be at on the go forward after this year.
Any final questions? If so, please raise your hand. Jamie Vinnick, go ahead.
Pat, just kind of curious what the mood around the athletic department is like right now.
I think we're going through the whole I would call stages of grief. I mean, this is an institution, an athletic program that is extraordinarily proud of what it's been able to achieve over the last century. It's really remarkable when you think about who Washington State is, the external world's perception that the odds are stacked against it, and yet over and over it continues to prove its critics wrong. So it's really an anomaly when you think about what Washington State has become. I mean, it's celebrated on ESPN Game Day every Saturday with its own segment to the performance of our football team, our basketball programs, our volleyball team, our soccer teams. Our baseball team was the 13th winningest baseball program in college baseball. The glorious history with Henry Rono and all the track and field excellence we've had in the past. So it's a place with an enormous amount of pride. And we're one of those schools that loves Washington State, and the students love the experience here, and the staff are fiercely loyal to the mission and the purpose of what this place stands for. So it's been tough, but the reality is Cougs are tough, and we'll come out swinging when it's all said and done. This thing is far from over. That's why I keep telling our staff, realignment's going to continue to happen, and we're going to continue to prove our critics wrong. We're going to continue to go forward, and Washington State will continue to be a national brand, because unlike most of the schools in and around the country, we've actually earned it through the work of all of our student athletes and all of our alums around the world.
I think that's a pretty good way to end it, Pat. Thank you so much for spending a little time with us.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.